All right, thanks, Ashley. And thanks everybody for coming out to take a look at what's here in IMAGINiT Clarity 2024.1. And in particular, if you're an existing Clarity customer, we appreciate your ongoing interest and support in the IMAGINiT Clarity product. So let's dive in. For the agenda, it's a relatively quick, I think, meeting today and webinar, although I'm happy to dive in as deeply as people want to see what's in this release in more detail. I'll be driving that mostly from your Q&A at the end of the webinar. But we typically go through a quick review of the release history and how this release fits into the release history, the specifics of this release. And as we look at our enhancements and fixes that we've done throughout this release process, we've kind of identified the themes are around productivity and power, starting to get insights out of your Revit journal files, as well as some API enhancements, some space programming enhancements, and then some enhancements that don't really fit into a clear category, but we'll also go through those and share what are there. So diving in, the Clarity release history, we've continued to have our 2 releases per year cadence. Gosh, going back, I'm not sure how far. I suspect it's all the way back since Clarity was introduced in 2011. But at this point, we're going to continue that sort of release cadence, 1 release in the spring, primarily to support new versions of Revit, Revit Server, all of the various Autodesk products, and then another release in the fall where we catch up and do a little bit more feature-oriented enhancements. So that's what we have been doing, and that brings us to where we are today. Just as a reminder, though, both Clarity 2024 and 2024.1 support the following versions of Revit and Revit Server. So 2020 of Revit through 2024, that's 5 versions. Plus we've got what we call limited support for Revit 2019 tasks. That is, you can run an older version of the Clarity Task Server and get support by connecting that up to Revit or to Clarity 2024.1, and that will continue to work. When we say limited support, it's basically just that some of the new features introduced in this version, and we'll talk about what those are, those wouldn't be running in 2019. But everything that used to work will continue to work as it did in the previous version of Clarity. So we hope that that's enough Revit versions to make it so that you're not sort of held back by your need to continuing to support Revit 2018 or that kind of thing. So moving forward, the first and probably biggest and most interesting feature that we added in the Clarity 2024.1 release addresses a problem that we've seen mostly with people on very large projects. And to talk about it, we would say traditionally, Clarity has been great in situations where you've got 20 Revit models or 5 Revit models on your project, and you need to make PDFs of a bunch of them. And so you're going to fire those off, and it's going to make the PDFs. It'll make a separate task for each model. And if you've got 1 or 2 or 3 task servers that are set up to do that work, that work's going to be load balanced between those 3. So the tasks get broken up into by model, and the work gets done, and it all happens in the background. So that's Clarity, and that's how it's done things traditionally. The different problem that some customers have had, especially if they've got very large kind of projects, is if you have one model that's got 1,000 sheets in it, or something like that, big number of sheets, something that takes a long time to print. And historically, there was really, that's still one task. It's going to get claimed by just one of your task servers. and then it's going to grind and take as long as it takes to print out those 1,000 sheets or however many they are. And there wasn't really much that you could do about it other than you as the Clarity administrator figuring out a way to have separate sheet sets. So if you wanted to break things up into pieces and have your own separate tasks to be able to divide and conquer that work, it was just something that you had to set up and maintain. But that's work to keep that up to date and have it all work smoothly. So what we've done in Clarity 2024.1 to help in this kind of situation is for you to be able to go in and identify that you'd like to be able to split tasks up. And the concept is that for the task types that support this kind of operation, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you can say, for my PDF task, for example, if there's more than X number of sheets, I want you to split that into batches. And so instead of one task flowing to one task server, we would see one task go into one task server, but when it opened the bottle and saw how big the list of sheets was to process, it would divide and conquer. So you'd wind up with separate tasks, breaking it up into pieces, batches of 100, and those tasks would then get divided and claimed by other task servers in order to do the actual work that needed to be done. So split, if there's more than X number of sheets, split into batches of 100, of up to 100. So our algorithm, if you had 101, you'd wind up with 2 batches, one of 50 and one of 51. So it's just really, what's the maximum batch size that we could split into. So that's the concept that we have behind the new split tasks kind of feature. Is it's optional, you opt into it, and we hope that it's something that can take your big tasks and make them get through the process faster in an intelligent way. So currently the targeted tasks are on PDF, DWG, and Dynamo for families. If you can think of another one that might benefit from the concept of taking a big list of things to do and divide and conquer to make it go faster, please let us know. But these seemed like the key task types for us to support in the initial release. We also have exposed out our custom task API. So if anybody's got your own custom tasks that you've developed, you can leverage the same kind of custom task API that we do within our tasks and add that kind of capability to your own tasks. So ultimately it's available in these, and we expect that we might further push it to other tasks in the future, but we're curious to see if people have ideas and what they'd like to use it on. So at the end of this, if people would like to see it in action or that kind of thing, I'm happy to fire something off to show it. But yeah, we'll keep moving forward. So the second area that we've added to in Clarity 2024.1 is trying to get insights out of journal files. And the way that we do this is with the IMAGINiT Clarity client, the add-in for Revit that runs inside your Revit environment and can send information to the host. And we've had this for many years, and it's already set up to pass in other information about what version of Revit, what add-ins you have installed, what your Revit sessions are, what models you're working on, and how much time you spent on them. All of that is already flowing from the Clarity client to the Clarity host. But we had a variety of I think, forward-thinking customers that said, we feel like there's more that we want to get out of every individual's Revit journal file. And so we now have the ability with Clarity Client to be able to send at the end of the Revit session, to send in the journal file for that Revit session and deliver that over to the Clarity host machine, where there's a new service that runs in the background just waiting to receive journals and processing them. And as we go through and process them, we're turning it into 3 different bits of information at the moment. Sort of a deeper Revit session info than what we were already sending via our add-in. We're tracking command usage. So we know exactly what Revit commands were run within the session. And then Revit events. So this is sort of a catch-all for things that we know that people are concerned about. It ranges from crashes and sort of nasty errors that we see into it, all the way through to other pop-up dialogues and that kind of thing. So this is our sort of catch-all for what happened during the Revit session. So what do we hope that people can use this for? We have built in some of our own reports into Clarity 2024.1 to let you answer things like, hey, what Revit commands are being used? And there's sort of the interest in the native Revit commands, but what we've had specifically asked for is questions about add-ins. We've traditionally sent in add-in install information, but we weren't sending in what add-ins are actually used. And so we were asked by customers like, how do I know how many licenses of this add-in or that add-in that I actually need to pay for? Because I don't know, I know who's got it installed. I don't know who really uses it and how much they use it. And so we're now tracking all of that data. Every command that gets sent in is flagged as this is an add-in command or this is a native Revit command. And so you can get into the data and understand how many times people, and who ran this particular product X number of times in a particular range of time. So that's one thing that you can do for it. Another thing that we were asked about is trying to get a sense of how does user, given 2 users in the system, how does user A's Revit usage in terms of the Revit commands that they use compare to user B? So if you've got an expert user and somebody that's a relative new hire, after the first week or month or whatever you might do, you could look at what commands are being used by both of them and sort of cross-check against them so that you could have a sense of what commands are being used by user A that are not being used by user B, or vice versa, and what's the prevalence of each command or the ranking of each command for how often something gets used in one case that's not being used in another or being used less. So this is a little bit, I would say, it's closer to information, and you've got to provide the actual insight that comes from it. But it's really, I think, a good starting place to give you the data in a format that you can come up with insights from it by letting you compare. And then finally, just what kinds of crashes or other things are we seeing? What kind of errors are happening inside of Revit? That's this Revit events side of things. So yeah, that's another bit of data that you can see. All of these tables of data are also available via Power BI. So you can get at it via the SQL sort of interface to be able to pull this data into something like Power BI or Excel and be able to look more deeply at it than the built-in reports that we have that you can still customize, but not quite to the degree that you can with a Power BI dashboard. So yeah, that's our journal file insights. It's an area that we think will grow a little bit, I think, over time, depending on what people want to see from it. But we feel like it rounds out some of the insights that we wanted to be able to provide based on what's going on inside of the Revit model. So next up, API enhancements, and I realize not everybody's a developer or interested in developing with Clarity, but just for the subset of you that are interested in this kind of thing, all of the Clarity tasks that we create ourselves use the same Clarity custom task API that we make available to customers. So there's nothing that we can do with our tasks that you couldn't do with your own sort of tasks that behave differently or cover something that we don't support. But we have now added support for task launching and task splitting to support our own tasks that do the task splitting kind of mechanism, and the same thing is possible if you use the custom tasks API. And we've already had at least one or two customers, I think, to take advantage of this in their own custom tasks that they've developed in .NET generally. This doesn't support today the Dynamo tasks, PyRevit tasks, that kind of thing, but if there's interest, you should let us know. The Clarity REST web API, so this is being able to drive Clarity from the outside, from an outside kind of application. Got new features in terms of being able to create new tasks, adding and removing members from projects, triggering a rescan of the project, getting the status of your rescan, as well as retrieving all the models for a given project. So yeah, different capabilities for those developers that are out there. So moving on, another segment of our user base is the people who use Clarity Space Programming module. It's intended mostly for architects that do sort of space planning, space programming, early stage setup of what is the program and how does this sort of make the transition into Revit during conceptual or schematic design, and then onward into detailed design later on. So that's a whole space programming is a whole module that attaches to Clarity, and if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can reach out and we'd be happy to show it to you. But it is an additional module that adds on to a Clarity on-premise installation. So what have we done around the space programming side of things? So one thing that's really actually for all users, it was specifically driven by the space programming users, which is the ability to easily change if you've got a Clarity project that points to a BIM 360 or ACC project, and then suddenly you want to point it to something else. That wasn't really easily possible before, but now it is. It's just something that you can do in the edit project page. The people in space programming use it to just point to an empty project during the early phases when it's nothing actually even exists in Revit. But later on, when things actually do exist in Revit, then they need to point their project to a new ACC project, for example. Departmental hierarchy. So we used to have spaces assigned to a particular department, but the departments were really kind of flat. If instead you have a hierarchical sort of department structure, you can now choose that structure, model that structure, and have your spaces grouped by different levels of the departmental hierarchy. We also did some enhancements for data sheets, and historically the Clarity product had data sheets that were designed for Revit users, or after there was a Revit model and you wanted to document the room or equipment data sheets that were out there based on what was designed in Revit. With Clarity Space Programming, we've sort of moved that earlier in the process so that you can have data sheets just based on the program requirements. So that's something that has existed for a while. What we did in two different ways in this new release is, how does that grow over time? How does a program data sheet that starts its life in the abstract with nothing tied to in Revit, How does that grow as later in the process you do wind up with actual Revit rooms that are tied back to it? So our existing room requirement data sheets can now report on the Revit rooms that are in the model and related. And we also created a new type of data sheet. We would technically call it a composite or consolidated room report. And this is something that mixes the room requirement with a single actual room. At the beginning, there's only the requirement, but if you have a requirement that says, I need 5 of this, this classroom in the model, it will grow to be 5 different data sheets as the actual rooms get added. So in both cases, they're really trying to address how does the program requirement grow, the data sheet for it, how does it grow over the life of the project? And then finally, inside of Revit, we've got some tools for people who do that sort of conceptual schematic layout to try to take a set of 5 rooms or whatever and say, drop this into the Revit model for me in the right size and let me stretch and pull and lay them out into reality. These UIs are a little bit more friendly now. They're modeless, so you can just sort of pick place, pick place, pick place, just more friendly. So yeah, and then moving into other small enhancements that we've got, or maybe enhancements that don't fit into one of our nice themes or categories. So twin motion Datasmith export. So there are, I know that there's a lot of people who do live sort of twin motion integration with Revit these days. That's built into Revit 2024 and higher. But in older releases of Revit, you still did an export for Datasmith, and there's still some scenarios where you might want to. We can now automate that process, so it happens in the background. Web services. So some of our enhancements that we do are in order to support our own technical support group. That group that works primarily out of Omaha, Nebraska. They come to us with what kinds of issues people have been seeing most commonly, or in some cases, what are the trickiest issues to understand when they happen. So our own Clarity Web Services health check is something that they effectively asked for, just to know that people have got that configured properly, because ultimately you need both the Clarity Web application and the web services to be working together hand in hand, and there were some configuration options that were just incompatible. This is a big one. So for the longest time, and going back to 10 years or more in Clarity, if you had a Revit error, something like dimension references not found or something like that, that would effectively stop your Revit processing. And we did that intentionally because the resolution for that particular Revit error, as an example, is you got to delete the dimension. And if we're responsible for making your PDFs, we don't know if that dimension is important or not important. Do you care about it or not? And so we were conservative about it, and we said, well, we're not going to open the model and delete dimensions. We're just going to back out and put up an error. And I mean, it made sense to a degree, but it also annoyed people who were particularly just trying to get some work in progress kind of PDFs made. And so we now have options inside of the task server where you are able to basically tell us, for these specific errors, if you see them, do the default resolution, take care of it, and just let it slide. We're still, in general, going to be relinquishing and not saving and not syncing to central. So the changes that we make probably don't matter from that perspective. but this will allow some things that have been holding you up and preventing you from getting your prints and exports done. As long as you're opting into that behavior, we're going to let it slide, document it, and move on. So yeah, that's a big one. Let's see, we've got some improvements for missing links. We didn't used to have an understanding in BIM 360 of whether something was missing because it was unloaded in a workspace versus missing because it was actually not found. That's actually been addressed. We've got some enhancements to the data that we can export based on some things that people specifically wanted to know that we weren't doing. Cleaning schemas out. So this is a tricky one, but we've run into a variety of customers that are concerned, obviously, with the whole Revit 2024.1 schema issue. That they wanted schemas cleaned out of their models, if that's possible. And there are some restrictions on it and some quirks to the whole way that works, but we have built in clean schemas as an option into both Publish Revit model, as well as, I forgot that we did this, but based on some customer feedback during the beta process, we actually added it to as an option to our audit, compact, and purge task. So you can also clean schemas while you're doing model maintenance. And you have to tell us what the schemas are. We can document what schemas are actually in the model, those kinds of things. So yeah, so we can do that, and potentially, if you've got schema kinds of issues, we've got some mechanisms to be able to clean those out, but with a variety of limitations. Dynamo tasks, being able to pass structured output. So if your Dynamo task creates a bunch of different files that are output in separate folders and that kind of thing, we're kind of gathering them all up and delivering them all to one folder. We now support that separate folder structure kind of output. And then we had a variety of customers that as they had more projects over time, they were using up a lot of their system resources with SQL database for projects that had been already sort of marked as inactive in the system, but they were still taking up memory. And so we've now made that so that if you mark a project in Clarity as inactive, or if you use the option that automatically deactivates the project, then then it will actually take the project database offline and therefore save you some RAM on the machine so that you're not using so much RAM with projects that are not active. Clarity Client silent install settings. So the Clarity Client is the install is a little bit new and different in this version. We did that to specifically address some things with the journal file. Like we don't want to make it so that you have to log in to Clarity in order to know where your journal file or where your other data that Clarity is interested in, what's the name of your machine that it needs to get sent to. Ultimately, the local machine needs to know that in order to figure out where it's sending it. And so that's now part of a question as part of the install is what's your server name and does it require SSL or HTTPS for delivery? And so it prompts you, and so we now have the option also to push that as part of the silent install settings. So yeah, so that's all of our small enhancement items, and you can see there are some of these that were just so important that we decided to backport them into the 2024.0. So if you've got a reasonably updated, like in the past month or two, these things have also been backported into 2024.0. So run your task server updates and or host updates, as it were. Actually, I think these are all task updates. So run your task updates for 2024.0 and you'll get some of these as well. So with that, I mean, that's really the high level sort of presentation, and I'd intended on having some additional slides to go a little bit deeper, but I figured actually that I wanted to have this more driven by who's on the call and what your interest is in. There's no sense in spending a ton of time in space programming if there's nobody here that's interested in seeing the deeper guts of space programming. So I'm happy to go deeper into anything that you saw today, or listen to any feedback that you have on what you saw today, and I'm happy to pull it up and demo it live. I'll I'll risk it by demoing it live. But I also want to answer some other frequently asked questions. In terms of the Clarity 2024.1 release for people who are Clarity customers, how do you get it? It should already have been sent just via email, a download link to whoever is the designated contact for your company for it, as well as anybody else who is signed up for our monthly report should have also gotten the information about the new version, how to download it, how to install it, that kind of thing. It does not require a new license. If you're already running Clarity 2024.0, no new license, the existing thing works. If in fact you are coming up from 2023, then you would need a new license as part of that, and that can be arranged depending on what kind of license you have and that kind of thing. What does it take to install? So this is not sort of our patching mechanism, our updater sort of mechanism. This is an actual setup.exe kind of thing. Still reasonably fast. I mean, most of the ones I've upgraded have been 15 minutes, 20 minutes to do the actual update on both the host server and the task servers. So it's not a big lift to do it, and we do have videos recorded that show you the process of what the upgrade looks like. So that's also in the email that was sent out to people. You can also request that information from the Clarity support team. I also want to mention before I open it up to Q&A, if people are interested in the Clarity Cloud product, definitely encourage you to find out more. That's a product that continues to grow and get stronger and stronger. Most of our time is often spent talking about our on-premise Clarity product, where you're providing the host server and task servers. But Clarity Cloud, it's a growing option, and it gets you out of having to manage the Clarity host server. It's all just managed for you in software as a service. There had been some limitations about our ability to send all of the different types of tasks over to be executed at Autodesk. We have an option now for hybrid task servers, where you have on-premise Clarity task servers. Gives you a lot of on-premise both power and control of your cost and flexibility and that kind of thing. Solves a lot of things that were holding people back in the past. So I encourage you to check out Clarity Cloud if you're interested. So with all that, I will open things up for questions. I do encourage you to put things, well, primarily into the questions panel, but you're also welcome to put them into chat. But we'll focus on starting with people's questions and what do people want to see. And I'm going to invite Joe Iconseer to jump in and start narrating these to me so I can focus on
absolutely
and showing.
I love nothing more than just to put you in the firing line of questions and stand on the side and gleefully giggle. But split tasks. So a question, if you've got a couple of different task machines and you're splitting a task and you have other tasks running on the other task servers, does the split task fail, or does it wait and jump into the queue on those additional machines when they free up?
It doesn't fail. The tasks are just put into the queue as effectively like a one-off copy of the task with a subset that says, you're going to do the PDF just as configured, but you're only going to do these specific sheets. So if you imagine it sort of like that, it's just as if you had configured a bunch of specific tasks and carefully divided up your PDF, for example, into a bunch of different tasks. It's just kind of doing that on the fly for you.
Cool. So it fits into the queue as the rest. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, and it is there are a bunch of little bits of smartness to it, like things know that they are a subtask, as we're calling it, and it won't do certain things like historically, if we generated 20 more tasks that all were on this pointed at the same model, another task server might grab all of them at once. These subtasks cannot be grabbed and claimed all at the same time by one machine. So it knows that there are limits as to how much you can group them together and group what you claim and that kind of thing. So we've tried to make it somewhat intelligent so that it's not going to fail in any of the easy ways that we can imagine.
Cool. We've got a couple questions about the allowing errors feature.
Yep.
One of them was, how does it work to port that feature back into previous versions of Clarity? Will people get it just by running the regular patch updater, and how do they get to configuring it?
Yeah, so just run the regular patch updater. But that said, it is something, especially in 2024.0, it does involve going into to a config file and adding basically like the identifier for each error type that you want to basically let slide. The Clarity support team has a pretty good document that describes the process and points you at here's the typical names of the errors and that kind of thing. So I would recommend running your updater and then asking support for the information. In 2024.1, it's I believe at least documented in our help system, as well as if you manage your task servers centrally, as in use the global task options, so that you can manage your task server settings via the web and sort of push them out to all the task servers. That is something that in 2024.1 you can just sort of configure it in one place, and it'll automatically get picked up by all of the task servers.
Okay, and to confirm then for the documentation of where to find the error codes and things like that, your request is that if people get in touch with support, or is there a link we can share through this meeting?
There's a link, I think, I'm going to pull it up real quick and test whether I'm accurate. I think if in 2024.1, there's maybe a white paper resolving Revit errors during open. I will put can we put a link into this?
You can put it into the chat, or okay. I can do that since I'm not sharing my screen. I can pull that up in the backside from that help link.
I've put it into the chat. I don't know if people can have it, but
yeah, I see it.
But yeah, and if you don't have 2024.1, just go into your own help system and then change this from whatever version you have to 2024.1. That'll get you here. White papers resolving Revit errors. But going to support for this, like I think I'd still maybe suggest that, because they probably have like some easy button, like here's exactly what you want to put in for the typical kind of settings. I mean, most people, if I look at it, most people want the dimension references so that they can tell you exactly what it is, whereas this gives you links to this mentions dimension references invalid and stuff, but it points you out to some heavier documentation for what are the names of all the other other options and stuff that you can turn off or let slide.
Cool. Going from there then to some stuff about the, where do we want to go next? Project editing. So project edit in 2024.1 now allows you to change a project from local network to cloud or vice versa.
No, sorry.
Yeah, I think that might have been a misunderstanding. So
yep. So it's more like if you're currently pointed to a BIM 360 project, we didn't used to have a way to go in and change what BIM 360 ACC project you were pointed to. So we are now clearer on what can be done, as well as you can go in and change not just the authorization, but you can change to say, hey, point to a different project, different hub, all that kind of stuff. So as part of the edit project process, but it
not the
still
source
platform,
but within the platform.
We're not changing the project type. You're just allowed to go in and change, where it points to. Same project type.
And then a request for just a little bit more detail on the option for cleaning schemas through the audit task.
Yes, and I should be careful about what I said when I put up that slide. I was thinking publish Revit model got backported, but when we added it late in the process to the audit task, I don't think that got backported at this moment. But okay. Send me an email and $2 and maybe we'll do it. No, I'm just kidding. Let's see.
It's 10.
But yeah, Joe needs his cut apparently. So, but yeah. So I think to answer the question, so on the audit side of things, Revit audit and compact is our task, and yeah. So it's going to do an audit and compact. The purge is optional, and the erase schemas is optional. So I believe whether you hit no or whether you hit yes and blank this out, when it runs, it's going to document in the logs what the schemas are that are in the model and everything that we can tell you about those schemas. You'll get a table of data, and these days every model has, it feels like has no less than 10 schemas in it somehow. Sometimes they're even Autodesk schemas. But ultimately, if you're choosing to erase, you need to put in the actual schema GUID that you want to have erased, one or more of them, or I think we did support the word all. We can try, and ultimately we'll open the model, and during the process we will attempt to get rid of the schemas that you don't want to have in there. The whole process is a little bit weird, in part because schemas are not really brought into the Revit model. It's weird. The schemas are brought in both to the Revit model, but also to the Revit application, and so it's a weird thing that makes them, somewhat viral, as people have discovered, but also it limits you a little bit. Like, I believe that we're only allowed to erase it if it is in one and only one document, which generally Clarity should be. But I guess if there are links or that kind of stuff, that could potentially prevent you from being able to fully erase the schemas that exist. But yeah, I recommend starting with letting it show you, hey, here's all the schemas, and then you can start looking at opting in to erasing schemas that you'd prefer to have erased. We will take our best shot at erasing them. I'm not in control about whether that works or not, but we're making the call to make it happen.
Cool. So some questions about the journal aspect of things. So one of them, and I'm just going to read this one word for word. So there we go. So journal files, does there have to be a project in Clarity, or will it extract just from Revit with the plugin installed? And I'm not done yet. Could I put metrics of errors? Well, that gets into BI, so let me stop there. So is it only for Revit files that are associated to a Clarity project?
It is not. Some of the other things that we have historically done with Clarity Client that did require like a matching project, over there for like how much time was spent and or metrics or that kind of stuff. This is completely, does not care. Every Revit journal file will be sent. Every Revit journal file will be processed for all of this information. So we don't care if you've got a Clarity project set up for it or not.
Okay. And so this will be a me add into that person's question, but if somebody's working remote, for that to happen, they'd have a VPN active so that their workstation at their home can communicate with the host. But what happens if they don't have a VPN running and can't communicate? Is it stored and cached for later transmittal, or is it just, sorry?
I feel like it, no, that's a good question. I feel like it is. I feel like we do store it and try to deliver it the next time that Revit finishes, but I'm not as solid on that as I should be. I know that there's other things inside of Clarity Client that behave that way, where we just kind of cache it and try next time.
Okay.
But I'm 80% sure that yeah, we will in that case where you're not able to connect to the Clarity host, we save it and try to deliver it later, provided the Revit journal still exists.
Okay. So then the other part related to journals, different question. I found that over time, some legacy PCs still show up in the journal processing service for add-ins, etc. Can we get a clear button as an admin or a way to clear things out that we know really don't exist? And I'm thinking this is not just journals, but when we log, say you have these, yeah.
This is our, what's been historically built in is the CAD management feature. And so these workstations, workstation details, Revit sessions, these are all in the add-ins. So yeah, so this is all historical data, but yes, you're right. This laptop may no longer exist, so perhaps it's no longer relevant. Yeah, we'll take a note on that for giving you some option to purge by, seems like by workstation or by user. Either one of those seems worthy. Today, if you need it done, you can also reach out to support and we'll tell you how to do it in the back end in the database.
Okay.
Seems reasonable to give you a tool to do it.
Cool. So back to just data, journal files, and other types of things. It's actually going back into really, it's a Power BI question. So let me just read it through. Could I put metrics of errors into Power BI where we have that data in a dashboard, BI dashboard, drill down for tech support teams and others that could look up a user or machine and see what error codes from the journal file came from which user machines, and reading all that through a BI report,
yes,
pointing to Clarity.
Yeah, this Revit session info that we're capturing, I mean, includes I believe your Windows user, your Revit user, as well as all the session data and both the command usage and the Revit events that we found inside of that journal that we're specifically looking for. These three are all cross-linked together. So within Power BI, I mean, we don't have the sort of nice OData connection for it, so you'd have to go directly via SQL, but you could absolutely do that with Power BI, is point to these three tables and then be able to see by user, by machine, by Revit version, whatever it might be, what kind of events are you seeing most often.
Cool. Question about adding, removing members. Is the adding and removing of members from projects compatible with BIM 360 and ACC? Guessing what that means is if you add them here, can we have that automatically also?
Yeah, it's not integrated here. It's interesting. We are, now that Autodesk has opened this up for ACC, we are trying to figure out what our offering looks like to help with that problem. And we do have some ideas, whether that's something like our Active Directory sync, or whether it's something else. But ultimately, as you know, it's not just like what user, what project. When you're talking about ACC or BIM 360, it's also what role and what everything else. So yeah, it is a problem that we want to solve. But yeah, we're not driving anything back and forth from that at this point, but we are working on how best to do it actively.
Cool. And as long as you got the site up,
very much interested in people's opinions. So send me a quick email on how you think it should work or how it would work to make your life better. We're looking for guidance from people who have ideas on these things.
Okay. There was a request to see if we could take a quick peek to see what the task splitting UI looks like.
Sure. Let's see. So task splitting. Hopefully this has a task already set up, something like PDF. Okay, so your PDF task, really it's just something where we split large tasks. So you're opting into the behavior here. If there's more than X number of sheets, then split into batches that are this big. So this is just something the first task gets created. If it sees, hey, I've got 150 sheets, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to claim the first 50 for myself, and I'm going to fire off 2 more tasks for batch 2 of 3 and batch 3 of 3 to do the others. And those are just tasks that get put onto the cube and executed wherever they get executed. Whether that's in the same machine, different machines, it's just whatever's available to claim and do the job.
Cool. And this will be just a moment if anybody's, go ahead.
I should also say, I mean, there are some limitations on it. Things like combining, making a single file at the end, right? If your workflow is, I want a single, I've got 1,000 sheets and I need a single PDF at the end, but I want to subdivide it into batches of 100, something like that. So let's say you had 1,000 sheets and we subdivide, and so you got 10 tasks all doing things. We don't have a mechanism right now. We're looking at it, but we don't have a mechanism right now to come back at the end and say, put together these these PDFs into a single thing after all 10 of them have done the job. And so as a result, it works better for the creating a separate PDF for each sheet. If you do combined, you get we change the file name slightly so that you can see, this is subset 1, subset 2. You might wind up, if you're in a combined sense, you might wind up with 10, in this case, in this example, 10 PDFs of 100 apiece, but you'd still have to get them combined, that last step.
Cool. And to reinforce what you were saying before, when it splits it into that batch of 10 sets of 100, as far as the task processing is concerned, it's effectively working as 10 individual 100 sheet tasks that'll be split up amongst all of your task machines in the queue, just like every other task balancing.
Correct. Yep.
Cool. Then our last little bits are just, maybe this is a little bit of a PSA that you can throw in there, but it's a feature request and then, well, kind of two feature requests, but one of them being live Q&A with Matt, where we talk to users about feature requests. We are still doing those from time to time, but maybe this is a promotion, self-promotion thing for feedback. And
yeah.
What do we call it? The guidance committee? No.
We've not really. It's not a very organized thing,
Sure.
But watch around the time. I guess it's really just not a very organized sort of thing, and I would like to make it a little bit more organized. Generally, if you're interested in being involved in that kind of meeting, send me an email. We'll probably do another one in sometime beginning to middle of January to talk about anything else that we're going to work on in the spring release. That's sort of one timeline that where it can happen.
Cool. And then confirming, yes, install links were emailed out to the person that we have as your Clarity Major point of contact. If you don't find them, if that person doesn't know where they are, reach out to our support team, to your account manager, whomever, and we'll be able to get you that information again.
Yep. Generally, we have reposted the link. So if you went and downloaded the 2024 link today, you would actually get 2024.1. We've sort of renamed the link that just ends in 2024.zip. Like the 2024.0 is now 2024.0.zip. Anybody who clicks on the link today will get 2024.1.
Cool. And with that, I will say thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate all the questions and feedback and everything we had here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.